Hello everyone and welcome to week 11. We're getting closer and closer to the half course, so it means we're getting closer and closer to the half course project. And this half course project is going to be all about happiness and happy countries and statistics. So that's why starting today we will learn certain things that will help you to excel at your final project, and one of them is talking about numbers and statistics. We're going to discuss happy countries and what makes them happy, and of course you cannot avoid statistics and numbers, and you want to feel confident talking about such things in English for all sorts of reasons, to be honest. So let's dive in. First things first, I want to talk a little bit about special symbols when we read particular kinds of numbers. So first things first, we have this kind of a number. Try reading it. So what would be your way of reading it? Okay, then this. Then this. So it's important that if you read, 0523 1500, we don't do that. So there are particular ways of reading numbers like that, and let's quickly go through them. So first things first, when it's not the whole number, right? We call it a point. So we say, for example, 0.5, and usually in English it's not a comma actually, but the period. So sometimes people say 0.5, but if it's 0, they can even skip 0. They just say 0.5. If it's not 0, like 1.5, 2.5, of course you cannot skip. But if it's 0.5, you can say 0.5 or just 0.5. Here we say it's 2/3. So the upper number would be just 2, 3, 4, like regular number. The bottom one is going to be the ordinal number, like third, fourth, fifth, like 2/3. And it's important in Russian, I know many languages would say 1,500. In English though, we calculate in hundreds. So basically, because 1,000 is 1,000, so instead of saying 1,500, an American speaker specifically would say 1,500 or 1,200 or 2,400. That's the way they usually calculate. So now let's practice a bit. So here you can see the text. Try reading it out loud and then listen to my way of reading it and make sure that you pronounced it the same way. So listen carefully and make sure you pause the video before you want to check it. So first you want to try doing it yourself. So 3/4 of Danish people claim to be happy, and only 0.9% of them are illiterate. The average salary there is 4,200 euros. And here, of course, you could say, and only 0.9%. It's also okay. So basically that's all the kind of special symbols you're gonna deal with specifically for this project. So make sure that you practice with it very well doing your homework on the platform. So next thing, when we talk about statistics, we usually talk about rates, but it's not always clear what it means, rate. Well, so let's look at this graphic here. So this graphic is the violent crimes in Denmark. So, and here you can see how many violent crimes were reported per particular number of people. So for example, in 2018, I can barely see it, but in 2018, they registered 577 offenses. Per means for every, per 100,000 people. So per 100,000 people, they had 577 offenses, meaning crimes reported. Okay, so rate basically means that this kind of a percent, right? So what percent of 100,000 people reported violent crimes. And that's why we say, let's say Denmark has blah 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 percent of violent crime rate. So what we would do would take 577 and we would divide it, right? Divide it by 100,000. And we would get around 0.5%. So we can say that Denmark has 0.5% violent crime rate. That's the way you can read this graphic. So, for example, you can see Denmark is really safe. It has only 0.5% violent crime rate. So percent here is missing. Sorry, guys, but you get an idea. So again, don't say rate of percent or percent of rate. We just say blah, blah, blah percent. And then what rate? 2%, unemployment rate, 10%, I don't know, happiness rate, 15%, literacy rate, and so on and so forth. And you'll see a lot of those things in your homework as well, in the article, as well as in the video you're going to use for your home practice later on, as well as during preparation for your final project. So, one more thing. When we talk about numbers, we don't always want to be precise and specific. Quite often we don't want to talk about very kind of specific long numbers. So for that matter, we use 3 words: under, over, and around. So, for example, if you go to the official website of Danish statistics, you can see these numbers. And of course, you can say 5,009,900,095 and so on and so forth, but it's too much, right? So what do you do? So let's take, for example, 1.6 GDP growth. Oh my God. GDP growth, of course, right? So, well, what you can say 1.6, but it's a little too specific. So what you can say, just over 1% means more than 1%. But Americans, again, native speakers generally don't want to say more than blah, blah, blah. Just over 1% or over 1.5%. Then here, 2.0, it's basically free, right? So what you can say, because when you say under, it means it's not free, guys, right? So, and it's about unemployment, so we want to present Denmark in a complimentary way. So unemployment is under 3%, 2.9 to be specific. And again, when we talk about population, that's a terrible number. Just say around 6 million, right? So let's practice a bit, right? So basically, if you want to read this graphic, again, you know what? Look. So try to read this graphic. Again, let me erase everything. Try to read this graphic without looking at the screen, right? And using the correct numbers, the not specific but quite kind of general numbers. So try it. Of course, make sure you pause the video. And then you kind of go back and see the right way of doing that. So the right way of doing that would be, so the Danish population is around 6 million people, at over 1% GDP growth and under 3% of unemployment rate, or under 3% unemployment rate, actually. You can also do that. Okay, so we figured that one out. And finally, let's talk a little bit about margin, because when you listen to people talking about statistics and data, you often hear this word margin. But in a nutshell, margin is quite a simple idea. So let's look at this graphic. So it's basically the words 15 happiest nations and countries, right, with a particular kind of a index, right? So 7.5, 7.4, and so on and so forth. So now let's look at Denmark, which is number 1. It used to be in 2015. So, and at United Kingdom in 2020, at the 23rd position. So you can see that Denmark is really happy and the UK is not nearly that happy, right? So if we compare those two, we can see that there is a great deal of a margin between them. So in this context, if we translate it into normal English, it's basically difference. So when we talk about margin, we talk about difference in statistics. So here we can see a wide margin. So big margin, wide margin, big difference. Here, for example, if you compare Denmark 7.5 and Canada around 7.5, right? So you can see the margin is smaller. So we usually say it's narrow margin. and we usually use the preposition by. So for example, you compare Denmark and the UK. So let's give it a look. So Denmark is happier than the UK, and you want to say that the difference is big, right? That's what you say, by a wide margin, that's all. Right? But if you look at, let's say Denmark and Canada, you can say that Denmark is happier than Canada by a narrow margin. And again, when you watch videos, when you listen to smart people talking about this stuff, they always use this by a wide margin, by a narrow margin. And you will also use it presenting your data next week as a part of your final project, of course. That's why we're going through all of this practice. Now then, let's try to use it ourselves. So what you need to do, here you have a little bit of information like unemployment 2.9. You need to put all your knowledge together to express the statistics in an elegant and natural way. So for example, unemployment 2.9%. Denmark has 2.9 unemployment rate, or even more interesting, unemployment rate in Denmark is under 3%, right? So again, first, keep in mind we have over, we have under, we have point, we have two-third, we have margin, right? So we have around. First things first, again, you pause the video, you say it yourself, then you listen to me saying that. Okay, so average salary in Denmark is around 4,200 euros. I can do that. Around, and then I use 4,200. Okay, so Denmark has around 0.6% violent crime rate. Oh my god, that was not easy. Next, so literacy rate in Denmark is under 99%, or is around 99%. And here we can see level of stress, the US margin, and we compare Denmark. So the level of stress in Denmark is lower than in the US by a wide margin, because I think people in Denmark are way less stressed, right? So it's the level of stress is lower than in the US by a wide margin. So hopefully you said it in a kind of similar way, but it's again important to hear that too. So this video is the video for your next homework, and let me just give a little bit of a taste, because in this video I have a lot of statistics which you will actually going to work with, but let me just give you a taste of that in this short excerpt. So let's first listen, of course.
Finland is a very safe and secure country, having their crime rate since the 90s, having a 0.2% poverty rate, 100% electricity access, and a very long life.
So they have low crime rate, and they have 0.2%. What rate? Let's listen again.
Finland is a very safe and secure country, having their crime rate since the 90s, having a 0.2% poverty rate, 100% electricity access, and a...
So, 0.2 crime rate, I guess? Is it?
Is not great for your mental health. And Finland is a very safe and secure country, having their crime rate since the 90s, having a 0.2% poverty rate.
Not crime, but poverty rate, right? We can talk about how poor people, right? So if you have only 0.2% or 0.2% poverty rate, means most people are not in poverty, right?
100% electricity access and a
100% electricity access, right? So we can also use percent, not just with rate as well as with access, right? So this video is generally extremely saturated with statistics and interesting phrases. I know that it's a little bit hard to catch it by ear when you just start dealing with it, but believe me, a lot of interesting videos on politics, history, social problems would include research and would include statistics. So you have to be comfortable with that at such a high level of English proficiency as you all guys have. So it's always about making the second step. So not just theory, it's homework. Make sure you practice in your homework. Make sure you do your writing. You have a little bit of a writing exercise next session, and make sure you come to class to talk about that, to practice that, to give Sorry, I meant to get feedback. Okay, hopefully it was clear. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to help you, and see you in my next video. Bye bye.